not without the screaming. An energy so stark, a Marshall Mathers without the rhymes. Like executing Beethoven music without the lines. You know something's missing, but you can't figure out why. Maybe it was done and fleeing and the music's about to die. It's like the Snoop without the dog, and a tour without the smoke. Biggie without the Smalls, Tyson without the Broke. Led without the Zeppelin, Strummer without the Clash. Paul without Lennon, like Johnny without the Cash. Like Mick without Keith, and the band without the boss. Just like Angus without the Young, and Wings without the sauce. Guns without the Roses, Axl without Slash. A guitar without Jimmy, a finale without Mash. Mash, 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 mash. When life seems down and everything tattered, take a trip with us back to when the music mattered. When life seems down and everything tattered, take a trip with us back to when the music mattered. Music mattered, music mattered, music mattered, music mattered, music mattered, music mattered, music mattered.
Music mattered, music mattered. I have never been more unprepared to start a show than I am right now. The theme music,
cool song, man.
The theme music started and like everything, my computer unplugged, everything fell apart on me hit my mic stand. I was literally just trying to get everything together. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 1 of When the Music Mattered. I'm your boy, Toronto's pride and joy, Mr. Ray Rauth, and I am with my we have done each other's show before. This is the first time we've done a project together. That's boy, true. Army Kris, who in typical Ray Rauth fashion, this show came together within days. I had an idea. I texted Kris. He was in. I was like, fuck it, let's do it Monday. And here we are. What's going on, buddy?
I was like, what? What are we doing? Suddenly the socials are lighting up. I'm going, holy shit, man. I guess we're on. We're doing this. We were talking about doing a project in October.
When I'm ready to go, I'm ready
to go. I should have known as soon as the Leafs are out, you'd be ready. You got nothing else to do, right?
The Leafs are out. Like, I watched a single second of the Leafs game, but cheers to all the Leafs fans. I'm not a hockey guy, but I do get excited at playoff time to figure out how the Leafs are going to get themselves knocked out of the playoffs, just so I can just talk shit to everybody. Because the province is absolutely in shambles right now. People are just losing their mind. They're blaming Mitch Marner. So they just can't beat Brad Marchand. I think that's just the thing, right?
No. And this is not a sports show, but I had to get that dig in because I'm still in it.
Because we got enough Toronto people that'll be listening. Anyways, it's when the music mattered. So basically, Kris and I are going to talk about music. There's no other really way to explain it. Sometimes it'll be completely themed out, like it will be today, where we're going to talk about the origins of rock and a few of those bands that had shit to do with those origins. We've talked about doing the origins of hip hop in the 80s. Today, we're looking at the origins of punk rock. And then other days, maybe we'll just be looking at, in particular, artists, looking at playlists, looking at whatever. Today's episode is inspired because I am going to see Billy Idol on Friday, which has been a bucket list musician for me to see live. So that's why we did it. Kris, man, let me ask you this question, though, when we talk about punk rock, before we get into the bands. When you hear the word punk rock, it could mean different things for different people. And I think this is a really cool dynamic because you're in your 50s. I'm in my late 30s. And so we're coming at this from very different perspectives. The bands that we're going to be talking about today, I discovered them in the late 90s and early 2000s. You were kind of watching them as they hit the scene and started building their popularity. So, and we're also going to see, I saw the aftermath of punk rock. You saw the origins of punk rock. So when you hear the word punk rock, like, what is the image that comes to your mind when you think of punk rock music?
Well, we'll talk about the subgenres later because they're so confusing these days. So punk rock for me, when it really, I went through, like most people, a musical evolution as a kid where you listen to all kinds of stuff. But it started, I was a skater kid, so it was on the skate scene, punk music, because of which we'll get into the origins of it and why it evolved. It was with the skate scene, and it was energetic, fast. And when you're on a half pipe, you're energetic and fast. So the music fit the mood, and it wasn't something I listened to very much other than what shit leaked into radio, which we'll also get into. It was more of the heavier stuff. Some local bands from Edmonton, a band called SNFU comes to mind. and that it was that scene at the time and that vibe. So that's what I think of. And this is just so we're putting a timestamp on this. I'm talking about the early 80s for me.
Yeah, so you're talking early late 80s, coming out of the 70s, because late 70s when punk really came in the scene, when the
Yeah.
Ramones and the Sex Pistols and the Clash really made their name for themselves. Gen X and Billy Idol came around in the late 70s. Billy Idol went on his own in the 80s. See, and for me, when I think of punk rock, coming from the skate scene as well, punk rock was huge. But growing up in the 2000s, being a millennial, see, comparing this to like a Gen X, being a millennial, I grew up in the pop punk era. So we had the Green Days, the Billy Idol, or the Billy Idols, the Green Days, the Blink-182s, the Sum 41s.
41s, all that stuff.
Yeah,
Which is all good evolution. Don't get me wrong. That's great music.
Yeah, so I was in the evolution of punk rock, which was what they called the pop punk scene, and I like that you got into the local bands, like, you know, out of Edmonton, because that was huge. I don't know what it was like in the 80s, but that was huge in the 2000s of going like to the local punk shows and that type of thing. And some of the bands that have come out of that here in the GTA, Sum 41, you know, living in Oakville for a time, Finger 11, who were the Rainbow Butt Monkeys at the time. You know,
that's right. That's I forgot about that.
Yeah,
now
they come out of Burlington. Boys Night out of Burlington, Ontario. You know, so there was a lot of these sort of underground bands that became something as they got older in that pop punk scene. Was the underground scene? I know we know this. We're going to get into this, especially when we get into the Ramones here in just a minute. But what was the underground scene like in the punk era, in the punk stage, like say in the 80s, when you really getting into it?
It was very much underground. You're not going to hear that on radio. There was, I can't remember. There's a name of this concert hall, if you will, for lack of a better term. It's called the Starlight Room now, but back and it still plays kind of alt bands and stuff that go in there. Small venue, you know what I mean? Toronto's probably got 200 of them, and I can't remember the name of it because I'm going back to the 80s and I'm old now. But it was very much underground. That's what, you know, why people gravitated towards it, because there was this anti-mainstream movement, if you will. You know what I mean? So, like, if you were a Misfit, also a great band, you know, you would gravitate towards that. Skaters were, you know, we were bad guys back then. You can't skateboard here, can't do this. So finally, they organized some skate parks, and then they get the band sometimes playing this place. But you're talking the evolution of garage bands. They're just finding places to put their stuff out and bootlegging CDs and tapes out of their trunks and shit. Paper posters on the walls, and they had very few venues they could play in just because of the nature of the music at that time in the 80s.
And if you think about those 70s and 80s punk bands, especially the ones who, and I think for some of them, like, again, we'll get into them in a second, but like the Ramones, the Misfits is another band I put here.
Yep.
Their sort of mainstream came after the fact. They weren't mainstream when they were first getting out. And
yeah, see, a lot of people shit on these bands because they know London Calling, right? Or you know what I mean? They know Anarchy in the UK. They know 2 or 3 songs, maybe by each of the bands we're going to kind of highlight today. But those guys had to grind back in the day in the 70s and early 80s to get to where they were. And those guys, these bands we're talking about, they were living that anti-system, and you know, and
that anti-authority.
Sorry, that's the word I'm looking for. Anti-authority life, and they had to grind to like make a living doing that, because it was a lifestyle, not a lifestyle. Lifestyle is something you do on the side. It was a life, and those guys were grinding hard, and it wasn't easy to make money. You know, when the Sex Pistols get like banned from the BBC and one of the most censored bands ever to come out of the UK, it's pretty hard to get some airtime, but you're committed to your craft and what you're going to do, so you got to respect that. And I'm glad they found success and, you know, got some hits out and made and went gold, platinum, diamond, whatever they went, depending on their album and how many they put out, and did find success. But it didn't start that way, especially in the late 60s, throughout the 70s, and even into the early 80s. It's not something you're going to hear on the radio. Like today, I'm just listening to my classic rock station, and I heard the Ramones, I heard the Sex Pistols, I heard the Clash, right? So it's an evolution for those bands in that genre. You could call it, this is where we get into that genre shit that pisses me off. They didn't sell out, but you got on the popular side to get some chart play. Is that fair? Do we want to dive into that this early or?
We'll get into that because especially when we get into the Clash, there's a lot of controversy
especially
around.
when we get into Billy Idol.
Yes, but Billy Idol is even a little different because they call him a sellout from the get-go, right? Where the Clash came from their untitled album that was that rawness, and then. But I have something to say. I'll be upfront with you. The Clash is one of my favorite bands of all time, and
I love them.
My favorite album of all time. This isn't saying it's the best album of all time. I don't want to get into this date, but my favorite album of all time is London Calling. I could listen to that album from start to finish. So I have an affinity for the Clash. But let's get into this now. Let's talk about the band that a lot of people credit to being the origins of punk rock. And I'm going to catalyst this and by saying this is
argumentative, so I know where you're going to go here. Yep.
But I have an issue with saying who started anything because the punk rock music and the style of punk rock music compared to the punk rock culture is very different things. And I mean, if you want to say to me, there's people are going to tell you, well, the Sex Pistols started it all. They started the punk rock culture. I'll tell you, Mozart started the punk rock culture. When you get into that, all the way back in the 16th century, when you're talking about anti-authority and you're talking about going against the grain.
Rock Me Amadeus by Falco is one of my favorite songs ever made. Guilty pleasure songs. We're doing one of those shows.
We are, because I've already got mine down. But let me give the people who don't know about these bands. So I'm going to give just a little brief introduction to who the Ramones are.
Let's give the listeners some history on who we're talking about here, because not a lot of people are like, this is not their genre. We're not starting this for episode 1. We're not staying safe.
No. We're going to get into
which I like. We're getting into some. We're starting off with punk.
Because
classic rock would have been easier to start with to ease us in. Nope, fuck that. We're doing this.
And I have a big opinion about the Sex Pistols, which I know is going to just infuriate the true punk rockers. Are going to go nuts, but we'll get into that. So here's a little history on the Ramones. So the Ramones were a pioneering punk rock band from Queens, New York in 1974, often credited as the first true punk band. They stripped back rock music down to its raw essentials, fast, loud, and rebellious. With their leather jackets, ripped jeans, and bowl-cut hair, the original lineup was Joey, Johnny, Dee Dee, and Tommy Ramone. They crafted a distinctive image and sound. Their self-entitled debut album, released in 1976, blasted through 14 songs. I gotta repeat this: 14 songs in under 30 minutes.
2 minutes a song, 28 minutes. Bam, 3 chords down, as you said in one of the socials. That's why I like these fucking guys. Rip, man.
And they just laid the groundwork for punk's global explosion. Though initially overlooked by the mainstream radio, the Ramones became legends in the underground scenes in New York to London. Of course, the old CBGB, and then they started playing in the London underground scene, which was really the fatherland or motherland of punk rock. Despite their limited success, commercial success, during their 22-year career, the Ramones' influence on music is immeasurable. Their relentless touring schedule and no-frills ethos inspired generations of punk, grunge, and alternative rock bands, from The Clash to the Sex Pistols, Nirvana, and Green Day. Every single one of those bands, from Johnny Rotten to Billy Joe Armstrong, have all credited the Ramones with being inspirations for them while they do things. And if anybody wants to go look at what their touring schedule was. It was fucking insane. No band has kept up. I think they went on something like a 4-year tour before they took a break, which is insane. Their biggest hit obviously was Blistric Bop. She Is a Punk Rocker, I Want to Be Sedated. The Ramones helped define a genre and cultural movement, and they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2002, and their legacy lives on as the godfathers of punk, loud, fast, and forever unforgettable. Chris, I was introduced to the Ramones by my father, as we lovingly call Florida Ray. He introduced me. I Want to Be Sedated was the first ever Ramones song I heard.
That checks out, yeah.
And I think I fell in love. So my dad is a Beach Boys guy, and I grew up listening to the Beach Boys and Mike Wilson, or Brian Wilson and Mike Love and those vocals. And I listened to the Ramones, and I remember once saying this to my dad, saying the Ramones are just the Beach Boys with distortion guitars and no melodies. And
is that what he said?
No, that's what I said, because I said
Oh,
it
that's
was.
what you said.
It's very
Wow.
it's very
Yeah.
beach rock. It's
Yep.
beach rock that got stripped down, and I said they're just the punk version of the Beach Boys. But I fell in love with the Ramones. They were the first. I'll be real with you. They were my introduction into what punk. I had heard Billy Idol's, Moni Moni and Dancing with Myself on the
Yeah,
radio,
but
the commercial hits.
that was past. So
Yeah.
I don't want to touch on that yet.
Yeah.
We'll save that for the crux.
But what I'm
I-
getting at, that had been my introduction to punk. Train in Vain, Should I Stay or Should I Go from the Clash? This was my first introduction into true punk rock music.
Yeah.
And again, they call them the blueprint. But for me, it was that as a guitar player, as a musician myself, it was that stripped down, just like let it go. I played in a punk band when I was younger, a couple of different punk bands, once as a bassist, once as a guitar player, sang in both of them.
Did you have that sexy haircut still, or did you have spiked hair?
Oh, I had mohawks. I
Okay,
had
that checks out.
orange Liberty spikes, purple
Right
mohawks.
on.
At one point, I had my whole head shaved except for my bangs, and then my bangs spiked up. I had it all. But people always ask me why I got into a punk band, and it wasn't because of the culture. It was because punk music was really easy to fucking play. It was really fucking easy. It was 3 to 4 notes. It was fast. It was hard. Go.
If you're an artist with electric guitar, because electric guitar is easier to play than acoustic, I think.
Oh yeah.
And I suck at both, but I know how to play them a little bit. And yeah, you can just hammer on it, man, and just get Buddy going and get the crowd fired up.
So as a music fan, Chris, as a musician, I look at it. I love the simplicity of it. I love to play the simplicity. Dude, I could grab my acoustic guitar for you right now and play 12 Ramones songs. They're all the same note, just played a little bit differently.
You'd be on MTV Unplugged with Ray Rauth.
Absolutely. But
covering Ramones tunes.
You as a music fan, what do you think of the Ramones and their stripped down, style of play? And where do you kind of do you see them as the blueprint and the godfathers of punk, or do you believe that they were sort of the afterthought after maybe some of the other bands?
I'll throw a wrench into that, because I think this has to do with the UK versus the USA. The United States is going to, and if you look at the Ramones in their own microcosm in America, North America, absolutely. And their style to me was a little heavier and harder. And I like that, especially, like I said, on a skateboard, it just helped. But then the flip side is who's the godfather? We could go back to the Stooges if you want. How far do you want to go back to the 60s? Fucking the people in the UK are going to have a completely different opinion about who are the godfathers of punk rock. I think the godfathers of the evolution of punk rock are the Ramones. That sounds like a cop-out answer. And it's hard to explain, but that's how I feel about that.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, because I think in North America compared to London, there's not even agreement on what punk rock is. The Rolling Stones. Rolling Stone magazine put out a top 10 punk albums of all time, and Nirvana was on there. And I'm
is that right?
And I'm Nirvana is that
grunge.
Is grunge. It was
Seattle
Seattle garage band.
Yeah.
But that's
not even in the ballpark to me.
But that's
to me, that's like saying John Denver is the father of death metal. Okay, let's stop it.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at. I don't think we could bring in one Brit right now, especially somebody who's engrossed in the music scene, whether now or before, that's going to consider Nirvana a punk band.
Not the guys I know.
But a US journalist does. And I think there's never going to be agreement on who started punk, mainly because they can't even agree on what the genre of punk really is.
Well, if you listen to in my previous life, sorry, I used to have a radio show, an internet radio show called The Mixtape, and we covered everything similar to what we're doing here, except we were actually playing music because we were allowed to. And I pissed and moaned about the amount of genres of, I'll just take metal, right? Death metal, goth metal, this metal, that metal, glam metal, hair metal. I'm like, back in the 80s, it was just called heavy metal. That was it. And then, but now you have to have all these subgenres. And I understand the evolution of artists experimenting with different sounds and cross genre pollination, cross pollination of genre, so that just drives another subgenre, right? I get that. So, but that creates that muddies, like, at the end of the day, do you give a shit what the genre is? Well, how's the sound and the vibe, and how does it make you feel? And like to me, it's just punk. I'm like it's not pop punk, punk this, punk that, punk or whatever. It's rock and roll. It's heavy metal. It's punk. It's country or whatever. So it's that gets so confusing. But anyway, to go back to the question because I just fucked off on a tangent. Which
No,
you will do.
but I completely agree with you. If I can just add to your point, I completely agree with you. I hate so I'm an alternative guy. I'm a post grunge era. I like Pearl Jam and Nirvana. Don't get me wrong. Like I like them, but I was more of I grew up with Bush.
Chris Cornell's God.
Yeah, yeah,
right.
Yeah, Bush,
Get it?
Candlebox, like that's where I grew up in. They call it the post grunge alternative era. But again, I'm the same as you. It's like where does the line draw between grunge, post grunge, alternative? Like where does I hate the cross genre as well. I'm like, can it all just be alternative? Can it all just be? I think grunge is alternative. To be real with you, it was just grunge was an alternative to what was on the main street, what we consider classic rock.
Yeah,
today.
so like at my age, you could say take 5 punk songs from 5. I don't know how many subgenres of punk there is. I don't even want to guess. I don't care. You play all 5 of them, and I'd say 4 out of 5 of them are punk, and 1 is pop punk ish esque.
Yeah.
Depending on would depend on the decade. No, that'd be it. It would depend on the decade. Because 90, like we're talking about the evolution of 70s, 80s punk going into the 90s with Sum 41 and bands like that.
I agree.
Now we're getting into pop punk because I don't know. I'm not going to say they wanted to make money and get airplay. I don't know. I don't know those guys.
I think it was just an evolution. I think
it's just an evolution of the music. I agree.
If you listen to Train in Vain from the Clash and you compare it to like Into Deep from Sum 41, there's a lot of similarities in the chord transitions and how it is. It's just the Sum 41 song is just more polished and it's in stereo and not in mono, and it was just an evolution, and it was also better technology, better instruments, better everything. When you're I can tell you the guitar I owned in 1995 compared to the guitar I owned in 2005 compared to the guitar I own now in 2025. I own multiple guitars, but when you go through them, technologies change, pedals change. The guitar stay the same, the pickups change, the pedals change, the amps change. Dude, just when I first started podcasting, it was just like a shitty little mic I had plugged into my Mac. Now I've got switchboards and I've got I've got everything else. Like you just evolve and technology
evolves. It's also so that the tech evolves as one, just the evolution of music is 2, and then the third one, which we should talk about here, is the evolution of punk. If you really want to get into it, the origins were based around like social discontent and anti-establishment and blah blah blah. And a lot of those bands maybe didn't feel that way. I'm talking about the 90s bands.
Yep.
And just said, hey, we like this kind of music and we're going to evolve it into our own style with newer technology and make that kind of music. It wasn't a message or a statement. Not every case. In some cases it might have been. But you got to separate that too. What was the social and economic mood at the time? Were you feeling beat down and oppressed, anti-government, anti-everything, anti-screw the hippie movement, screw the government, all that stuff needs to be factored in how that music comes out. How does it go from underground to our big alt station in Edmonton is Sonic 102, which is really good, great alt station. It's on most of the time. But those are the things you need to think about, because like again, going back to the first question you asked me, when you say punk rock, it just reminds me of those days where it was a bunch of misfit social outcasts who really liked to ride skateboards. We had a common thing, and that was the music. We listened to a lot of rap and hip hop too, but it was mostly because it was also similar. And that's why, right? Not because it was popular. None of that shit was played on the radio. You would hear none of that on the radio. There's no radio station back in the 80s that play any of that. Well, because radio back then was welcome to FM1. Oh my God, all Celine all day.
105.1. Let's listen to the Beatles for the 7th time.
For the 7th time today, exactly. Yeah. Right. So it was different. I mean, it was such an eye-opening experience to see. Like at first, I was shocked. Like I'm like, what in the fuck is this, man? Is your record player on the wrong speed or something? Because it's so fast, heavy, and hard.
Well,
And then when I felt it, it made sense to me.
let's transition right into that. This is the kind of the band that you could say started it all, and we're going to talk a little bit about
in
the
UK. The UK will tell you that.
The UK will say the Sex Pistols are the ones. Here's a little history on the Sex Pistols. The Sex Pistols were a revolutionary punk band formed in London in 1975, igniting a cultural and musical rebellion that shook the foundation of British society with snarling vocals, raw guitar riffs, and aggressive anti-establishment stance. The band, fronted by confrontational Johnny Rotten, real name John Linden, along with Steve Jones, Paul Cook, and Glenn Matlock, who was later replaced by the one and only Sid Vicious. They became the face of the UK punk movement. Their 1977 debut and only studio album was Nevermind the Bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols.
Never mind the bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols.
Yes, never mind the bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols was basically a middle finger at the status quo, a middle finger at society. And it had that anthem of anarchy in the UK and God Save the Queen. Though their career was short-lived, lasting barely 3 years, the Sex Pistols' impact was systemic. They weren't just a band, they were a cultural movement, and they were managed by what I'm going to refer to as a fucking dirtbag named Malcolm McLaren. And I'm going to leave it right there. The Sex Pistols, basically, they embodied punk rock. They started a culture. I have a big take on this band, so I'm going to let you go first, Chris, because I think once I get into my take, we're not going to get off of it.
I just got one thing to say about them, and it's more of a question to everybody listening. It'll be, listen, name me another band that put out one studio album that is still in rotation today. You can't. Ray.
Yep. No, fair enough.
That's it. I like them, but it's the impact off one album that is. I heard it today in the garage. I was working on my bike, and on classic rock, there was the Sex Pistols were playing. So it's just about to have that level of impact. So that's really all I got to say. I don't think they're the greatest band ever, but I like their shit.
It is time for me to get absolutely decimated, especially by the older British punk rockers.
Are you prepared for this?
You better. I'm ready for this.
You're ready?
This is hit? Okay. It's an opinion I've had for a long time. Anybody who's had a deep conversation about music with me, if we get into punk rock, has heard this take before, so it's not new for some of the people who I know will be listening today. This is no knock on Johnny Rotten. This is no knock on Steve Jones and no knock on Paul Cook. 3 talented musicians. I think Johnny Rotten could have done even more with his career if he could have stayed a little bit more grounded after the Sex Pistols. It's amazing to me, though, that the band that really sort of festered and helped morph the biggest generation of posers, especially here in North America, a band that was so anti-establishment, yet were led by Malcolm McLaren, who was nothing but a marketing media genius, who created an anthem that I refer to as a marketing stunt in anarchy in the UK. I want to say that the face of punk rock was the Sex Pistols. The face of the Sex Pistols was not the talented Johnny Rotten. It was the untalented Sid Vicious. Sid Vicious didn't know how to play the bass. Sid Vicious replaced a bass player. The entire Sex Pistols album, Nevermind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols, the bass lines were recorded by Steve Jones because Sid Vicious can't play the bass. He was brought in by Malcolm McLaren. He was manipulated by Malcolm McLaren. He was manipulated by his heroin addict girlfriend, who kept him as a heroin addict. They liked Sid Vicious because of his unpredictability, because of his violence, his sense of violence that he brought in, and they saw them as the face of punk rock. The Sex Pistols, in my opinion, though they helped revolutionize a culture, were more of a marketing stunt.
So you're saying the Sex Pistols are the greatest marketed punk band ever.
I think they're the greatest marketing stunt ever. I don't understand how you can be
Bold statement.
how you can be anti-authority, anti-establishment, anti-everything, and yet McLaren was nothing but a how do I make money? How do I establish them? Dude, they had Sid Vicious can't play the bass or couldn't play the bass.
So I never knew that till now.
Yeah, he
never knew that. And I'll bet a lot of people listening did not know that either. I didn't know that.
No, Steve Jones, he's the guitar player, right? He laid.
So what the fuck did they do when they toured?
Oh, it was shit. That's what basically broke up the band. Johnny Rotten and the rest of the band
overcovering with guitar.
They were so frustrated because Sid Vicious, number one, he was strung out all the time.
Well,
and he was encouraged by McLaren, the band's manager, to continue staying strung out because they wanted to totally manipulate. McLaren kept wanting to break him free from the Sex Pistols and put him solo because his whole persona of punk rock was so marketable to this vulnerable punk generation. That's where they wanted him to go. Johnny Rotten had enough. Johnny Rotten quit the Sex Pistols because of Malcolm McLaren, the manager, and Sid Vicious. If they would have kept Glenn Matlock, who was the original bassist of the band, the Sex Pistols would have had they'd still be touring today.
So why did he leave? Like, how'd that happen?
McLaren replaced him with Sid Vicious because Matlock.
McLaren did that.
Matlock wasn't punk enough. Matlock didn't give the image. So tell me something.
Yeah.
How is a group that was supposed to be this revolutionary punk group, they were carefully crafted and carefully manipulated and carefully presented to society? They're known as the inventors of punk, a culture that is all about anti-authority, anti-advertising, anti-everything. They were behind the scenes because of McLaren. And I really give Johnny Rotten, Steve Jones, and Paul Cook the pass here. These dudes just took their music serious and wanted to be a band. And
Man, I'm going to piss off some more people now because I'm going to side with you and go, because what you're telling me is the Sex Pistols are the first corporately generated boy band.
100%.
There, you heard it here.
You heard it here first.
What
a show.
What a boy band.
What a fucking...
We're done already.
Episode 1. But it's true. It's true. And I'm sorry. I know
that's the parallel I'm hearing. That's the parallel I'm hearing right now. Okay.
There's punkers that are going to be mad out there.
Right. Fair enough. But I mean, the facts are the facts. Right.
But they have been presented as this grainy against the grain thing. And I think it's an injustice to John Linden, aka Johnny Rotten, and Steve Jones and Paul Cook, who could have been a legitimate band, who I would have put those three guys, if they would have kept Matlock, in the same conversation as the Ramones and the Misfits and the Clash and some of these just really classic punk bands. You're 100% right. They were a corporate driven Malcolm McLaren. I'm telling you, Chris, when you have time, and anybody listening who's upset right now,
I'm going to check this out now because I've not fact checked this at all, and I trust you because that's your background. I'm going to look. Yeah,
look this up. McLaren.
That being said, never mind the Bullocks. It's the Sex Pistols is a good album.
No, it is. Look, there's nothing wrong with the album because Sid Vicious didn't play on it.
But again, it just the taint on that.
Yeah, Sid Vicious didn't play on it. Maybe one song
play on it or
they
whatever,
said
or he sucked at it and it got overdubbed or whatever the fuck you guys do.
Yeah, but he barely played. There's rumors that he barely played on it, but more people say that he didn't play on it at all. Right, like that's the whole thing. So I think for me, I've had it, and then the anarchy in the UK, the bleed over to North America. They even did it. There was a movie, I think it was called Punk a few years ago. It was all about the punk scene in North America, and he said something in it that it hit so home to me because I used to say the same thing. I always saw, especially when I grew up in the 2000s, the punk culture was just like, it was less about that anti-authority shit. And it was more about like being yourself. It was more about like not conforming. So I was like
that goes back to that evolution we talked about where it's not based on anger. It's about on individuality and everything, which is
correct.
Great. Yeah,
so I was skating on the weekend, listening to punk music, listening to hip hop, hanging with my friends, I was also an athlete who had a mohawk. Like I was literally just myself, right? And that's what the punk culture was. But then you had what I called the posers who were walking around like anarchy in the UK, man. I'm like, that doesn't even make sense in Canada, dude. Like it doesn't even make sense. Or people like, I'm an anarchist. And I'm like, what does that mean to you?
What does that even mean to you?
What does being an anarchist mean to you?
He goes, buddy, is gonna go, I didn't vote, bro. Okay,
Yeah.
beat it.
Exactly. So yeah, so that's my big take. I know like it's a big statement on episode number 1 where I understand in this space. I know I'm a sports guy. I have a lot of credibility in the sports space. I understand people don't actually realize that I know more about music than I do about sports. And I'm actually more passionate about creating music than I am about playing sports. I understand with no credibility, I just made one of the biggest friggin' statements that I possibly could.
It's bold.
But I promise you, do the research and you're going to see exactly what Chris said. They were the first corporate pushed. I'm not going to call them a boy band. That's
this is an analogy, just so we're clear. They're not a fucking boy band, but that's how all the boy bands were generated, right?
You're right. They were completely.
There's a guy out of Montreal. His name is Jean Lavoie that does a parody song about boy bands. I suggest you check it out.
If you guys haven't seen the documentary, I forget what it's called, but it's all about like NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys and basically how they got screwed as musicians.
They did. They got these are young men, almost kids, who were basically taken advantage of and like and corporations. But anyway,
one guy. But this is to me, McLaren was the first guy.
And Ray is not shitting on the music. He's shitting on the production and the evolution, what they were versus what they said they were.
I'm shitting on that they are always
fucking music. Anarchy in the UK is a great song.
Dude, I listened to that because of this show, because when I was prepping, I was listening to all the albums and I listened to that album
I played a whole bunch of stuff today. It brought me back in time. I won't lie to you, man.
Oh no, and that's why I said like I think it's an injustice to like Johnny Rotten and the rest of the boys.
It is talented guys that had a vision and a direction they wanted to go in, and then they got taken advantage of and manipulated by a marketing guy. Yeah. And they're not the first band and it won't be the last.
No, I just have this issue with putting them as this pedestal of the pedestal of this is what punk rockers are. And I was like, dude, they were a corporate machine that was put out to make money.
So I also want to backtrack with that whole UK USA fight that Canada's neutral in this. You can't have one fucking album and then say you're the godfathers of punk. You just think, no, sorry.
Well, no, exactly. Well,
I just don't agree with that.
Let's get into now what I guess what could be controversy to me, which is the greatest punk band of all time, and that is Joe Strummer and the Clash.
Yeah, see, you and I are aligned on this one.
And I will point out, I was saying this to my bride on the weekend or just the other day. I was saying, Joe Strummer is one of those guys too. Like, there's a lot of bands you can replace the singer and they'll still survive. Without Joe Strummer, like I can't listen to the Clash. Like it's got to be Joe Strummer and nobody. That voice is just so unique. But for the people who don't know the Clash, let me give you the same little breakdown. They emerged in the heart of London's punk scene in 1976, so right around the same time as the Sex Pistols and the Ramones here in North America. But they quickly found themselves apart with a bold fusion of punk rock, reggae, ska, dub, and political consciousness. They were less about anger and less about anarchy and anger, and they were more about the message. Fronted by Joe Strummer and Mick Jones and Paul Simon on the bass, and Troper Hedden on the drums. The Clash brought urgency, intellect, and genre-bending experimentation to punk. Their 1977 self-titled debut was raw energy and rebellion. But it was their landmark release, and what I said to me is my favorite album of all time was in 1979, London Calling, and that's what solidified the legacy of the Clash. It was an explosive double album blending sort of musical styles with sharp critiques of racism, unemployment, and social injustice. Throughout the years, they have been a bigger band. Now, the controversy around the Clash is they are seen as sellouts because they had the commercial hits. The Sex Pistols were not played on the radio. They were banned from the BBC. The Clash, again, were not angry anarchists. They were more sending messages through their music. And I would argue we're the first band to really mainstream punk rock. We are talking The Clash. Chris, you and I are on the same page. It sounds like.
We are. Yeah.
Talk to me about how you feel about Joe Strummer and The Clash.
I just think that they're okay. Let's just. I don't want to use the word sellout yet because that's a strong word. I think everything you just said is absolutely correct. They had a more moderate approach. They were dealing with socioeconomical problems, and I don't think they purposely took a softer approach than, say, the Sex Pistols, for example, or other bands that just never made it. They just, like, you don't have to be friggin' angry and mad and all the time to be punk. They just took it a more moderate direction, kind of leaning towards what you're talking about, the evolution of individuality, made good music, and it took off, and it's good, and London Calling certainly is the best one. What's my other favorite? Combat Rock,
that was Rock the Casbah, right? And
Stop the Cash Box, Stop the Cat, whatever. Yeah, right. So that everybody goes, oh, well, they sold out because they made it onto the charts and it wasn't angry and aggressive and wasn't banned. I'm like, well, no, I think they made the music they wanted to make and it took off. Like, that's what it's supposed to be, right?
And a lot of
the Clash. So the Clash is my favorite of all these bands. I know the Ramones is yours. The Clash is definitely my favorite band.
Oh no, the Clash is
of the bands we're talking about.
The Clash is my favorite. The Ramones was my introduction to punk rock.
Okay.
The Clash is my absolute favorite. And the thing is, like, Joe Strummer once talked about writing Train in Vain. And they said, it was a very poppy song. And he said, yeah, isn't it funny that I think at one point they referred to themselves as the only band that matters. And that was, Joe Strummer said, we're the only band that matters.
Man.
And they
Bold
said,
statement.
And they said, Train in Vain is a very pop song. And he says, this is amazing that the top punk band has the #1 pop song in the UK right now. And that was actually a shot at all the pop singers out there, showing how easy it was to write and perform a pop song. And Train in Vain became an absolute hit.
Sorry, I got to interrupt you. Just
Yes.
for 7 seconds. That Jean Lavoie parody song is called Pop Song.
Pop Song?
By Jean Lavoie. He's a Canadian comedian. It's fucking hilarious.
Okay.
You're right, because here's what my question to you is: what defines a pop song? The people listening or the artist when he wrote it?
Well, and that's exactly what it is, right?
Like,
is it a 4/4?
Yeah, when Buddy writes a song and they lay it down, you don't know till you know.
Well, that's like telling me the difference between a country song and a folk song. Like,
that's a whole other show, bro.
No, I know, but I think this is, again, I think this is where we get into that cross genre, cross this, cross that, right? Like, it's what is considered pop, what is considered,
like, it's not like he sat down with the punk manual. It says, okay, it has to be power chords, 3 strokes down. You have to hate everybody in your life and the government and yell and scream. And it's got to be 1 minute and 58 seconds long.
Well, no, and if you look at
the guy writes songs that he wants to write and make, and they evolve. I mean,
exactly.
And it gets fucking airplay, and he makes money, and suddenly he's a solo. I'm like, no, he's not. He wrote the music he wanted to write.
No, and his message that he was singing about was actually to help the betterment
on that song, exactly,
of society. Like, everything,
exactly.
That entire London Calling album, if you listen to it word for word, everything. I mean, look, my day job is in marketing
Positive
and advertising.
Messaging.
Well, but is in marketing and advertising, and my wife does the same thing. And I tell her all the time that, punk rock Ray, 17-year-old punk rock Ray would be kicking 38-year-old marketing Ray's ass. But there's a song on the London Calling album called Coca-Cola, spelled with a K because they couldn't spell it with a C. And the whole song is about how fucking shitty advertisers are. And I'm an advertiser, and I'm like, yeah, we are that shitty. Like, it's all just about making money. And
it's a funny. That was okay. That's the weirdest song in the whole album. I'm like, what the hell is this?
It's like a minute 50 long. It's not even
it's short. Minutes. Like, is this supposed to be a song, or is
Elevator
this slipped into the album? They're like, we'll just fill it with this.
He's just like, on the 34th, dude. He gets into
very different.
Like, if you listen to Clampdown on that album, like that first line, right?
Yeah.
Taking off his turban is this man a Jew? Come working for the Clampdown. I mean, he's already getting into racism and like, I mean, was talking about Palestine and Israel you know, like at a time when nobody was covering that kind of stuff. Like this dude, that's the most fucking punk rock you can be, is addressing the shit that really a lot of us,
And
as much
isn't
as
that like the point? Like if you're addressing socio-economical issues,
to
you
me
don't
it
have to
is.
be you don't have yeah, but you don't have to be mad about it all the time, right?
People just wanted that because the Sex Pistols were that they were, if you go back to the Sex Pistols,
Yep.
they were inciting violence, they were
Oh no, it was,
rioting.
yeah, they were that was all publicity stunt shit, right? That wasn't
No, that again, it was all manufactured. They were
manufactured. There's the
they
word.
they built it to be like that, but then that became the blueprint of punk rock. And then you, on the North American side, you had the Ramones, where it was like, again, you give me someone who's never touched a guitar before, and by the end of the day, I will teach them how to play a Ramone song, because it's so right. It's just stripped down again, 3 down, distortion, fast, hard, da 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 da
Yep.
da 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 da. You know, and Joey Ramone had this sort of delivery that I think if he's in any other genre, he's probably going nowhere in his career. And this isn't a knock on the Ramones. It was perfect for them. Everything, like even Joey Ramone's voice was stripped down. And
Yeah.
and again, but even so, when you get a band like the Clash, all of a sudden you got Strummer, who's super fucking talented. His music writing is complex. It's almost comparable to the when you look at the hip hop world, to like an Eminem when it comes to like a lyricist and the shit that they're addressing.
Oh, this at that pace. Yeah.
Yeah. Or even like
Yeah.
an LL Cool J, and who was, you know, addressing socioeconomic problems before it was being addressed on
Oh,
music
that's way
albums.
before NWA and gangster
Yeah.
rap, man. LL was, well, that's another show, so we're gonna stop
Yes.
there because
Yeah,
that's
well,
my show, bro.
absolutely. I'll let you take the lead on that. But I'm saying
it's
you
yeah,
can,
for sure. But
you
you're
can,
right. They're addressing those issues before they were
yeah,
before it became mainstream to look at those issues, right?
exactly. So you can compare LLs to Joe Strummer and the Clash and
Yep.
that type of thing. Which again, so is LL a punk rock? You know what I mean? I know let's not piss off the hip hop community, but it's
I don't know. I think every genre of music. I'm talking about the main ones. I'm an old 54-year-old man, not those bullshit sub ones. Every genre directly influences other genres.
100%. I mean,
like if you like old school blues music, that's what drove rock. Rock drove hip hop. Or no, that's not true. Sorry,
no,
blues
drew hip
blues
hop.
drew hip hop.
Well, blue actually,
But blues influenced like everything. Country, fucking. That's a whole other show too.
You give me a young, and this is no knock, but you give me a young R&B fan who's just like, I love R&B, and I played traditional old school R&B to them, they probably hate it. You know what I mean? Because the old school R&B was old rhythm and blues, like, you know what I mean? Like, and you're talking the BB Kings and pre.
Oh, I'm going back to Muddy Waters,
BB
just King.
Beautiful. And that was all, I mean, geez, I mean, rock and roll comes from Elvis Presley, which was singing black gospel music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Elvis, all
yeah.
Elvis's music, which was considered like, you know, the birth of rock.
Absolutely. And then
that comes from all that shit. I like Buddy Guy, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix came out of that. Okay, we got to move. We got to go.
Yeah. Okay, one more because I have to. One more, and then we'll bring it back. We got to wrap this up in a minute here.
Okay.
But you look at like some of these, you know, you talk about metal, you're a metal guy, and we'll be getting into metal because you're talking about thrashing solos, and you want to talk about like what guitar players and evolution of guitar players. Metal was the evolution of guitar players, but without Chuck Berry, none of your metal bands exist.
And every one of those guys that plays a guitar in any metal band of any subgenre of metal is going to tell you Chuck Berry.
Yeah, the metal doesn't exist.
That going. No.
If Johnny Be Good isn't a hit, metal doesn't exist today because of what he did. But we got one more guy, one more.
One more, and this is my controversy one.
And this
is controversy. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
So we're gonna look at Billy Idol. You want to talk about a quote unquote sellout, or you want to talk about a guy who brought pop mainstream? I'm going to talk a little bit about Billy Idol. Billy Idol, of course, burst onto the screen in the 1970s. Was originally part of Gen X, which was a part of that punk rock scene. And it wasn't very long after they made hits like I think Dance With Myself was Gen X. And then Billy went off on his own and hit a hit song with Steve Stevens. And I will give you a little bit of history on Steve Stevens here in a minute. His guitar player, they wrote White Wedding. And of course, my favorite song from Billy Idol, which is Rebel Yell. Can't wait. And then Moni Moni and Flesh and Fantasy. and a lot
Fantasy, yeah.
Eyes Without a Face has brought on a lot of the more poppy punk songs. I guess he'd probably be the original pop punk artist of his time, where he brought in that blend of punk, because you'll have a thing like Rebel Yell, which is just some old school punk licks that and then here she comes, turn around, Monet, which by the way, but by the way though, you can love Billy Idol, hate Billy Idol. Billy Idol brought us, hey motherfucker, get laid, get fucked. So
that is true.
A wedding staple for
all
any
you
good
people
Canadian.
at your high school grad. There you go.
I want to just before I'm gonna let you go off on Billy, because I know this is where the controversy, but I want to bring in just talk about Steve Stevens for a second. Because the reason I'm very excited, I wanted to go see Billy Idol. I like Billy Idol's music, but Steve Stevens is one of my idols, one of my guitar playing idols. I love Steve Stevens, and something that a lot of people don't know. Randy Rhoads, Ozzy Osbourne's guitar player, who was, famously wrote "Crazy Train," which is one of the hardest licks to play.
Oh yeah.
Who tragically died in a plane crash, is seen as one of the best rock guitar players. He's right up there with Eddie Van Halen. A guy who gets ignored a lot is Steve Stevens. Most people don't know this.
There was Steve Vai.
Oh yeah,
Van Halen, all those guys, man.
A lot of people don't realize that Ozzy Osbourne settled for Randy Rhoads because Billy Idol took Ozzy's preferred guitar player, Steve Stevens. Steve Stevens, if you can cut away from Billy and just listen to Steve Stevens and listen to some of his solo stuff, is a phenomenal guitar player. He's one of my idols, and as much as I'm gonna, enjoy seeing Joan Jett because she's opening up, I'll enjoy seeing Billy Idol.
She still got it, bro. Trust me.
She's opening for Billy. Excited to see Joan. Another one we could have put in the punk conversation here.
Yeah. Her and Blondie, man, could have been in there.
Yeah. Maybe we got to do a Women of Punk.
We're gonna do it. Well, we just do a females in rock and music, whatever. I'll wear my Whitney Houston shirt, and yes, I actually have one.
I'll wear my Miley Cyrus shirt, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah, there'll be stories behind that shit.
I can't wait until and I'm just going to tease this because it's called teaser for all you radio people. I cannot wait till I explain why Miley Cyrus is one of the best female rock singers of all time. I'm going to leave it right there.
Park it right there.
Right there. But Steve Stevens is a phenomenal guitar player, and I am so excited to actually get to watch him play live. But yeah, he was actually Ozzy's first choice over Randy Rhoads, which I think it worked out for both of them. They both, you know what I mean? Like, but no knock on Rhoads.
It might have worked out for both of them. Easily. Sure.
No knock on Rhoads, but a lot of people don't realize that Ozzy wanted Steve Stevens first.
Well, it's because Steve Stevens didn't get the recognition that Randy Rhoads got. Like, let's be honest, that's what it is. So.
Because one played for Ozzy and one played for Billy.
One played for Billy Idol. Yeah. Speaking
of Billy, here's your con. Let me just talk to me about Billy Idol.
Okay, so first of all, I love Billy Idol. I was introduced to Billy Idol in 1982, and this is post Generation X. So Billy Idol was a punk rock guy in a band called Generation X throughout the 70s. He was a front man, and that music was a little different, really take off. And then he went his own way, probably had good management and good direction in the 80s. He's my ZZ Top, because I love 70s ZZ Top, and then they went, and I'm not going to use the word sellout. That's not fair. I'm going to call it mainstream evolution or some shit like that. It's like, I'm going to go do this, and I love Billy Idol's music's great, but he kept the punk look, which was kind of like that. And it worked for him, but I felt like he stole that and applied it, because he didn't want to look like all the fucking big hair Bon Jovi with the tight satin and the makeup and shit. Like, he didn't want to do that. He wanted to keep that kind of edgy punk look, and it worked for him. So who am I to say anything? But he definitely pivoted in the 80s, much like ZZ Top did from the 70s into the 80s when Eliminator came out. Different show, sorry. And that's it. So it's not a hate thing, because I love Billy. I'm a huge Billy Idol fan, but I'm not a massive Generation X fan when he was front man. I like Billy Idol for what he was in the 80s, And he said, hey, you know what? I'm going to keep this punk look. The only guy that looks fucking weirder than me is Prince. And I'm rolling with this. And it worked for him. And good on him. And he's still touring. He's a little rough. But yeah, man, you're going to enjoy that show.
So
That's all I have to say on that. I'm not shitting on him because I don't consider it to be sellout. I consider it to be economically advantageous fucking pivoting, whatever you want to call it.
So I struggled who to put as our fourth artist into this, even though the show was inspired by me going to Billy Idol. I struggled because there was a long list of other punk bands we could have put there.
Yeah, so that was like, because when we were going through everything what we wanted to do, I'm like, Billy Idol, like that guy's not punk to me.
The reason I brought up Billy Idol, though, is because many people, especially say mainstream, I always say there's two different kinds of music fans. There's music fans like you and I that get into the minutia and get into the nuances of music. And then there's just like people like my wife, who God love her. She's just like, I love this song, and she would consider Billy Idol punk because of the snarl.
Really?
The blonde spiked hair. And if you go to a record store, he's still under the punk section, right?
Is
because
that right?
Yep.
You go to a nostalgic OG record store in Toronto. He's still falling under punk.
They'll still put him under punk because he started as a punk rocker.
And he did, but he's got
more pop hits and he's got punk hits
by himself.
100%.
He's got some punk-ish songs.
Rebel Yell. Rebel Yell's probably,
okay, well, that's also a hit, and Rebel Yell's pretty close, but that's more.
I would say it's his closest to
man.
punk. It was a little bit
probably,
more unleashed.
Yeah. And whatever, good for him, man. Like, he decided he wanted to pivot, and he did. He made money. Good on him.
Yeah, and you know what? Sometimes I always say, like, fuck, these guys got to eat too. It's like everybody wants. It's funny, right?
Yeah, right.
Everybody loves you when you're fucking starving, but as soon as you can feed your family, they're like, you fucking sell out.
Sold out, man. You sold out, bro.
I remember the backlash.
Maybe that guy wants to like pay his bills.
I remember the backlash when Rainbow Butt Monkeys became Finger 11, like the talk around like Oakville was like,
because they changed their name,
fucking sellouts like this and then. I'm like who the fuck is gonna go to the Rainbow Butt Monkey concert? Like, let's be serious, right?
You're never gonna hear Rainbow Butt Monkeys announced on the radio.
No, I think they're on like a Sony deal, and Sony was like, we're not fucking calling you guys the Rainbow Butt Monkey.
You got to change that to something else.
And dude, a guest I'm gonna bring on the show is a former colleague of ours from a different network. Chris Machete. He's known as a comic guy, but for 10 years.
Oh, yeah, that dude would be awesome on the show, man.
Yeah, for 10 years, he was on a Sony deal called the reason he's named Chris Machete is because he played in a band called Mr. Machete, and they were on a developmental deal with Sony for 10 years. And he told me basically it was Sony that broke up the band and fucking made him go to concentrate on art because he fucking was disenfranchised with the music industry. And
the label will do to you, man.
Yeah, and we'll get him on. And then our boy Brenton was also in that band.
Because Brenton promotes.
Yeah,
that's what he does. He's
a promoter. He's fucking touring with Shakira right now.
That dude is all over the planet. I don't even know what country he's in on any given day.
Dude, and he's not promoting like nobody. Like he's with Shakira right now. He was with Rod Stewart prior to that. Like this fucking guy goes. So we'll get them on. But going back to it, the reason I put Billy into this is because I believe that Billy Idol, because he's seen by the mainstream as punk rock, and I believe that a lot of mainstream media still considers him punk rock because of his blonde hair and his snarl and his.
Well, that's it. He's got the leather studded wrist and all that shit going on in his hairdo.
And his tie to Gen X. I believe that he kind of opened the door for the Green Days of the world to be played on the radio, and he opened the door for some of these punk bands who maybe wouldn't have got. I mean, you listen to the Dookie album of Green Day, and you wonder how the fuck did this get on the radio? Like, how did this, not just be like an underground band that became famous after? And I gotta say, I think it's the Billy Idols that helped open those doors. I'm not saying he inspired these bands, but I think that if there's no Billy Idol, there's no Billy Joe Armstrong. That's what I get at right now. And I think it was him who opened these doors. You can call him
Billy Idol didn't influence Nirvana, but Green Day, yeah.
But call him a sellout, call him what you want. I think Billy opened.
I never said he was a sellout.
I know you didn't, but some people will. But I'm saying you can call him whatever you want. But I think the reason I put him on the punk list is because I think he opened the door for the evolution of punk as we started getting into the more
Yeah.
mainstream punk artists as it became more acceptable to play that type of punk music on the radio.
But 90% of people wouldn't call Billy Idol a sellout because they didn't know who the fuck he was before Billy Idol.
Well, that's a fair statement.
Right? Till Vital Idol came out, they never heard of him.
No, that's an absolute fair statement.
Right? Like nobody. You ask, I could pick 20 friends that like Billy Idol. They're not fanatics, but they'd go see a show today if you came into town, because it's for us, especially for my age group, that was like your junior high school level music, and he had a lot of hits. And most of those people would not know that he was in a 70s punk band called Generation X. They'd never know that.
Listen to it. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Listen to an 80s radio station. I think in here in Toronto it's called Boom. And I think Billy Idol is like every fourth song they play.
Oh, probably. Yeah,
Billy
you're
Idol
getting
song.
Eyes Without a Face. You're getting Dancing with Myself.
New Wave, right?
So,
that's what I think they considered him, New Wave, which was that.
Well, okay. I know we're running out of time here.
We're talking subgenre. Yeah, talking subgenres.
So, do you remember Devo?
Yes.
Okay, they wore these weird pylons on their head. This is going back to when like Much Music and MTV first come out, right?
Yeah.
I'm dating myself here. And they had a song called Whip It. They might have had other ones, I would not know. And it was this new wave weird shit, and it felt like maybe Billy Idol was kind of like, because of the way he looked and kind of the way he sounded, he was like cross-dressing between these two genres, and then he escaped and became pop punk and said, no, I need to own this shit now.
I think so. I think truthfully, I think Billy Idol was made for MTV. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. His videos were good. We will have a whole show about the impact of in the 80s about if you didn't have a video, you were done.
Yeah, and how all of a sudden it just died because music. Even in the 90s and early 2000s, music videos were huge for us. Like and all of a sudden
now, if you see a music video, you're like, wow, they made a video. That's still a thing,
bro. I go like on YouTube and watch like music videos of new songs coming out by bands, and I'm like, I didn't even know they did that anymore. Like I thought it was just
didn't either. You see a few, but not
the fact that MTV and Much Music are still channels but don't play music. Just
no, they don't.
Kills me.
The MTV Music Awards. Like, okay, what? You don't play music anymore. You play Beavis and Butthead.
That's
18
it.
hours a day. Beat it.
All
but
right.
back then, yeah, if you didn't have a video, you were toast.
All right, so I think it's time to wrap this up. We've hit our hour. Chris has a hockey game to watch, and I've got a date to go on with my beautiful bride.
Nice.
Really, really appreciate everybody coming in this new project. Again, I know this is very different than what I've done in the past. For fans of the mixtape on a former radio station that both of us were a part of, this maybe not be that far to left field, but for those of you who only know Chris for his podcast, Fire and Effect, of course, I was Dear Pats Nation. I know this is very different, but as I'm getting older here, Chris, I want to do projects that I'm passionate about, and this is one of them.
Try out some new stuff. I love it.
And I appreciate you doing this with me. So you can follow us. We do have a YouTube channel called, I called it When the Music Mattered with Rauth and Army Kris, so that it's easier for people to find when you put in our names.
Couldn't possibly be shorter.
But we will. But if you just put in at When the Music Mattered, you'll find it there. We also have, right now we're on Spotify. Hopefully in the next few weeks we'll be across all the other ones. Of course, you can follow me on Instagram at Ray Rauth, on TikTok at Rauth1. I've heard rumors that a big angry Gen Xer who might be starting a TikTok, and I can't wait for that.
It seems inevitable that I might have to kick up a TikTok channel. Until then, you can get me at the Army Kris on Instagram, Threads, and that formerly thing known as Twitter, which I do not look at, but you can get at me on that.
Yeah,
I'll probably get on the TikTok machine sooner or later, but that means one of them's got to go, bro.
Well, I don't.
Shit's gonna go.
I think I don't do the Twitter or Blue Sky or anything anymore. We got friends who are still heavily invested in it.
Yeah, if you do want to get at me, DM me at the Army Kris. Only on IG. I'm not looking at nothing else.
Yeah,
I might get a TikTok channel.
I'm primarily IG as well. I think my Facebook profile is public as well, but
that's still a thing.
It literally just posts what I post on Instagram. So
just everything feeds it. Same as my Threads. I just do I'm Facebook free for since 2018. Very proud of myself.
Yeah, I don't do anything else. Yeah, it just feeds it. And I didn't know I could feed threads. I should probably start doing that. Because I've been posting separate. So that makes sense.
To automatically do it.
Makes sense. That sounds like a meta thing. Okay, so this is how we're going to finish the shows if you're okay with it, Chris. So I write music. Nobody knows that. It's something I've never. I
didn't know that. No.
It's something I don't share often. But I write music, and it's something that I've been encouraged by my wife to be a little bit more open about. And I do two things. I record my own music, like where I actually play all the instruments. I got a whole setup here, and I play all the instruments. Record. I'm not ready to release that music yet. That's as I'm getting older, I'm getting a little bit more self-conscious. However, I do write music and then generate it through AI. So where I write all the lyrics and work on the things. So if it's okay with you, Chris, I'm going to end this show with a song that I wrote.
Absolutely, man.
Called Just Tonight. It's not a punk song, but I picked this song because it's a female singing about something that's typically only acceptable when males do it. And I think, how fucking punk rock is that? So thank you, everybody, for tuning in to episode number 1. We will be back next week for episode 2, every Thursday night, 7 p.m. on our YouTube channel. Also find us on Spotify and hopefully very soon across all wherever you get your podcasts once we get all that accepted through. Until then, thank you. This was When the Music Mattered. Take care. See ya.
Cheers.
Take me hard, please take me